Hailing frequencies open and welcome aboard Treks and Tangents. I'm your co-host Brian.
And I'm your co-host Jackie. I'm the Star Trek newbie who treks off on tangents.
And I'm your Star Trek expert who's here to get the tangents back on track. Each episode we watch and talk about a different Star Trek episode. And this week we watched
Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 14, Balance of Terror.
And welcome back to another episode of Treks and Tangents, where the only people who take us seriously are the ones who aren't having any fun.
Right, this is supposed to be fun.
This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be just random fun.
And going around the world.
Yeah.
Star World.
The Star World. Well, looking at some of the metadata from our podcast and listeners, we actually do have listeners from around the world.
Really?
Yeah. Someone out there is a consistent listener in Germany. So
That's awesome.
Whoever that is, thank you so much. We do see the data and we do check on that. So
say hi to us. Hello.
hopefully you're enjoying your listen. If you're listening to this episode when it comes out live the day of, that would be January 20th of 2026, to date the episode. This Friday, the 23rd, is our second episode of Animated Detours over on our Patreon page.
Wild.
Yes. So if you haven't checked it out, if you want to become a crew member over there at patreon.com/Treks and Tangents, you can check out our little monthly detour into the animated series for Star Trek. And of course, just a thank you to everyone who listens to the show, everyone who leaves a comment to the episode, to their thoughts, their feelings toward the episode that we just covered. It's more fun for us to do this and have an interaction with our audience. We absolutely encourage people to leave a like, leave a comment, leave feedback. We appreciate it.
And share it.
And certainly share it with a friend.
Then you'll like having fun talking about it with a cup of tea.
Yes, but enough of showbiz and show announcements. Let's just jump into this week's episode, Submarines in Space. Let's revisit the turbolift tease from last week. That's where we gave Jackie the title of this week's episode, and Jackie gave her elevator pitch or turbolift tease to what she thought the plot was going to be. So, computer, what was Jackie's prediction to this week's episode?
After being given a hint that this week's episode introduced a new alien species to the Star Trek universe and that they frequently portrayed villains, last week Jackie guessed this week's episode plot to be, well then we are going to get better fighting powers. So we are going to have a new person on the Enterprise, an alien type.
So Jackie, how accurate do you think your turbolift tease was to the actual plot of the episode?
Definitely a failure.
Yeah,
I was like on the opposite end.
The opposite end. You had a big focus on a new crew member joining the Enterprise. Most of it, though, was, of course, the Romulans, the introduction of the Romulans.
Who I had no idea even existed.
Well, that is true as well. Probably thinking back to the animated series where we suddenly start seeing all sorts of new crew members pop up.
Yeah, which is why it's confusing. Because you're like, it's not like it. But it is, but it's not. But maybe it is.
But with all that being said, what did you think of the episode?
So it's funny that you said submarine in space, because that's the initial thought I had when I saw all of the Romulans huddled in a circle as if there was a periscope that they were looking out of while they were trying to figure out how to, blow up the Enterprise. But
yeah, that's actually an interesting thought because I hadn't made that parallel. Of course, this episode is heavily inspired by submarine warfare and movies of the time period. The phasers from the Enterprise acting as depth charges, running silent, not relying on visual clues as to where your enemy is, relying on sensors and readings like sonar. But I hadn't actually given that much thought as to every shot of the Romulan ship all takes place in their bridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cramped, or sometimes it seems to be, I guess that does kind of give the impression that the Romulan ship is extremely cramped and closed quarters, much like a submarine.
Well, when they did show the visual with the yellow bird under it, it did look smaller in size, in comparison. But whenever I kept watching that huddle up scene, I kept seeing that Denzel Washington movie with, that gentleman that just passed away in New Mexico. He and Denzel are on the submarine down below, and he's yelling at each other. Crimson Tide, and it was Gene Hackman that passed away.
Yeah, I pulled up the quick little summary. I forgot James Gandolfini was in that movie too.
It was a great movie.
It is a great movie. But yeah, I think an interesting point to go back, the fact that we only get one shot of one room on the Romulan ship, probably due to budget, was unintentionally portraying this feeling of a submarine, which was an intentional.
So they wanted it to look like a submarine.
They wanted the episode to feel like submarine warfare. I don't think it was intentional that the shot of the Romulan ship. What I'm saying is that they only used one room, the bridge on the Romulan ship, for budgetary purposes, and it just happened to also coincidentally portray a submarine that's tight, close quarters, and in those types of movies, we usually only get one room or two rooms.
Right, and then the captain or main character is in the front corner, just exasperated and what am I gonna do?
Yes, that's one way to describe it.
Well, there's a lot going on in his head.
So I take it you liked the episode.
I really did, except I need to talk to their costume department because the Romulans, their headgear was not great at all. They kept falling off their noses.
The little helmets that they had?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a deliberate decision on their part to make. We'll get to it later in the triple tidbits or fun facts at the end of the episode.
And they all had a towel pinned to their chest like a little kindergartner. Needed a note to their mom.
Yes, they're trying to portray the Romulan species as ancient Rome. That's why we had the specific titles for their ranks. The costumes, the helmet served a practical purpose, but I think that's part of that's the motivation behind their costume designs. Certainly their titles, how they address each other and so forth. I don't necessarily think that carries forward into Star Trek. While the Romulans certainly make reappearances time and time again, they, just like the Vulcans and Spock and some of these other concepts, they certainly morph and change into what becomes more familiar that carries forward beyond the original series into the Next Generation, DS9, certainly other series as well.
No, that makes complete sense. And this is the first time anyone is seeing them, so it's kind of like a touch test. Like, how will these guys work out?
Right. Also, interesting point to the concept of submarines and lack of visuals is that moment where they reveal in the episode the fact that they haven't seen what the Romulans look like. They fought an entire war.
Yes.
Without ever seeing what the Romulans look like, which plays an important part of the episode.
Only that their spacecraft is shaped has a bird of prey underneath it. It's
right.
Painted.
But even then, that came from Styles, and Styles got that information from word of mouth family history. That wasn't something that was pulled from the computer database. Again, I think part of what gives the episode such drama is how much they lean into this idea that the Romulans are an unknown adversary. I think that is recreated later in Star Trek with other villain alien species. The Borg come to mind for sure.
Going over my head.
Jaci looks totally confused, but I think Star Trek fans can draw an analogy between the appearance of the Romulans in this episode and how the Borg is introduced in the Next Generation. So it's safe to say we both enjoyed this episode.
Yes.
And with that, Jackie, why don't you dive in? See what I did there, submarines, and walk us through the episode.
We open by gathering in the Enterprise's chapel. We're gathering for a wedding. Janice is in the front lighting candles, and she's right behind the podium. I mean, it's simple but pretty. Scotty is in the back, ensuring that the ceremony will be available on all the screens throughout the ship. Kirk doesn't have to worry about that, but McCoy does tell him that there is a call waiting for him, so please, Kirk, contact the bridge. Spock informs Kirk that the Earth outposts number 2 and 3 are silent. When Kirk asks about number 4, can we get a report on number 4 whenever you can? So, because he has, a ceremony to go put on.
Well, specifically, Kirk tells Spock to maintain a course to outpost number 4. So this seems to be a developing situation where the Enterprise is already on its way to investigate.
Once Kirk is settled at the front, Scotty walks the bride, who happens to be Angela Martinez, to her groom Robert Tomlinson. She's wearing like a feather crown tiara thing. It's really cute because otherwise they're in their uniforms.
Yep, no fancy wedding dress or tuxedo for this wedding.
But her feathers were cute.
I wonder if the little bride and groom on top of the wedding cake are also wearing uniforms.
Oh, that'd be really cute. Once she gets up there to meet Robert, Kirk begins a monologue discussing how he gets the privilege of being the captain and he gets to be efficient at all of these weddings. But while he's talking about that, Sulu interrupts with a red alert. Kirk then runs back to call to Spock and inquire what is happening, and Spock tells him that Outpost 4 is under attack by an unknown ship. And then the red alerts continue to blast, and everyone is scrambling in the hallways to get to battle stations. And then we have our opening credits. After the credits, we have Captain's Log, where we are patrolling the neutral zone between Romulus and Remus. Outpost number 4 sends an emergency call to the Enterprise, and the Enterprise will move in to assist. On the Enterprise, Kirk enters the bridge where Uhura relays that Outpost number 4 is under attack. Spock verifies this as they're 8 minutes out, but Scotty promises to make sure they get there before then.
Yeah, he promises Kirk that they're going to try to get some more energy out of the engines to get there as quick as possible.
He is magic. Kirk then asks Spock to put the star vector on the screen.
And we get a map on the view screen of the bridge that shows a breakdown of Romulus space, the neutral zone that lies between Romulan space and Starfleet space. And we get a detailed look of all of these different outposts on the Federation side that line up along the neutral zone.
Kirk asks Uhura to open up a line of communication for the crew, so Spock is able to explain about the asteroids, the monitors, and how the zones worked, how they were established by a treaty after a huge war a century prior. Each side is supposed to stay on their own side of this divide, and if one goes over on the other side, then that is a declaration of war.
That's generally how neutral zones work.
But because this war was so long ago, there are no actual visuals of what the Romulans look like, and the Romulans do not know what the Enterprise, the Earth people, look like.
Yeah, it's touched upon that it's because of 100 years ago when this war existed that technology did not allow them these visual communications like we have in Star Trek now. That again also lends to this idea and leans into the theme of submarine warfare, where you're fighting and conducting war without any visuals of what you're doing. You're relying on sensor readings and screens and data, but there's no connection like, say, pilots in a plane, fighter pilots, where they can physically see what they're shooting at, or soldiers on the ground.
In fact, the collective we believe that the Romulans are warlike, cruel, and treacherous. But thankfully, there was a subspace radio established that the neutral zone would be in effect, and so far the peace has been kept until what seems to be now. And if either side crossed the line, that would be an act of war, so they would be able to defend themselves.
And in fact, Kirk ends the announcement to the crew of the Enterprise by explaining that they will have limited abilities and orders to defend themselves, but the Enterprise and these outposts, in comparison to avoiding a full-scale reignition of this war, are expendable. That Starfleet does not want them to take any action that would escalate conflict into a full-scale war. It is more important for Starfleet to maintain this shaky truce and peace agreement than it would be for the Enterprise to defend itself and respond to save itself.
Navigator Styles brings up that number 4 is being attacked and that they may intercept the Romulans.
Mr. Styles is definitely pushing for seeing how far they can push their orders in response and defense of themselves in these outposts.
He is very pushy. Kirk asks how would we know what a Romulan looks like? How would you know? Styles tells Kirk that their ships look like large birds of prey. He reminds Kirk that his family fought in the war that was mentioned that started this whole neutral space, and there is great family history of officers lost during the war for Styles' family. Kirk reminds Styles that that was their war and not the current situation at the moment.
So the Enterprise, on its way to Outpost 4, is passing by Outpost 2 and Outpost 3. And when they get within sensor range of these two outposts is when Spock is able to confirm that both of these outposts, the asteroids that they sat on, had been pulverized, that they're gone. That's why they weren't communicating with them.
Kirk asks Uhura to connect to the nearest command base and give a report every quarter hour. Then has Sulu call for everyone to man the battle stations. Navigator Styles is also energizing the weapons to full power. Angela, our bride, is at the phaser station. Tomlinson, the groom-to-be, passes by. Angela jokes that he's still her commanding officer, but soon they'll be married and they'll live happily ever after during this crazy interaction on the ship.
It's an interesting moment besides the fact that we see that the bride and groom work together and one is a superior officer to the other, but it's one of the only times, if not the only time, that we see this kind of disconnect between a command being issued on the bridge for the phasers to be powered up and fired, and then a cut to the actual station in engineering or weapons or wherever on the Enterprise it is to show that order being executed. Many times it's just the order is given on the bridge and we see the final result. Again, maybe an allusion to the whole theme of submarine warfare, watching submarine movies where you see an order given on the bridge and then that order is relayed through the comm system to the relevant section of the submarine where it's carried out. They tell it to fire torpedoes, and then we see the actual loading of torpedoes and the firing of torpedoes. Just an interesting moment.
Outpost 4 is 5 minutes away now and still responding to communication. Kirk talks with the commander on 4, and it is relayed that 2, 3, and 8 are gone.
Kind of repetitive for the commander to say that 2 and 3, not the commander, it's repetitive for the show to again say that 2 and 3 are gone when we had the dramatic reveal by Spock. But I guess within the Star Trek universe, the commander would have no way of knowing the Enterprise knows that.
Yeah, they do focus on 2 and 3 a lot. And then they throw in 8 like they're coming down and up.
Yeah, that was interesting as well. I don't even think 8 appears on the map from earlier.
I didn't see it either, so
I
that's why I was confused.
I thought it was, I don't even know if 1 appears. I thought it was just 2 through 7.
That's what I saw.
Yeah,
Maybe that's all that they were focusing on.
maybe.
Who knows? The commander on number 4 doesn't know what took them out. Even with the deflectors that they have, it still wasn't enough power to eliminate a hit to
Yeah.
break through. It took us a second time to break through the shield also.
Yeah, and it's an unknown weapon. It's not one that they've seen before. Again, it's an unknown ship, an unknown weapon. We all know it's the Romulans. It's not that big of a surprise. But he does also very quickly mention that with their shields down, they can't withstand another attack.
While the commander and Enterprise are discussing what has been happening, the invisible alien ship becomes visible again and shoots and destroys the outpost that the commander was in. It's in a great large red ball of flames. The Enterprise crew is stunned. Spock then relays that the outpost number 4 is disintegrated. Kirk realizes that the Romulan ship must be visible when firing at the Enterprise or any other ship, and then it can go back to being invisible. Now that it's invisible, Spock, though, he sees a blip on the screen and notices that it is just moving at a leisurely pace on its way home, as if it thinks that it's alone, that no one's following it. Kirk believes that this invisibility works both ways, preventing them from seeing the Enterprise as well.
Which would explain why the ship is not making a more direct course back across the neutral zone. It's taking a more leisurely, Spock's exact words, route back toward the neutral zone instead of a route that is designed to evade the Enterprise
and run away from it. Kirk also orders that Styles and Sulu match the Romulan ship and act like a shadow and follow it wherever it goes. Just don't be caught and do not cross the neutral zone. Uhura is able to find code communication that Spock is able to lock on and bring up a visual on the screen of exactly what they're looking at on the bridge of the other ship that ironically look a lot like Vulcans.
Which is a big dramatic moment for the show because this would be the first time ever that humans and members of Starfleet have seen what Romulans look like. And then we get a commercial break.
We're still on the bridge of the Enterprise, and Uhura is attempting to interpret the Romulan signals, and Styles sarcastically suggests just giving the job to Spock, making underlying comments, and Kirk orders him to keep his bigotry to himself. While that is happening, though, on the other ship of the Romulans, their personnel are having the same discussion as well. They believe they're being followed. Cloaking takes extra power. The Earth outpost contacted the Earth vessel, and that vessel just keeps following them. They call it a reflection, but yet their own commander does not agree. He continues on with the cloaking system. In fact, he's actually happy he's almost home. Others ask, why not attack the Earth ship?
I think it's just a way for the show to establish to the viewer that this is a cautious Romulan commander. His crew wants to just head back to their home territory across the neutral zone and not use the cloaking device during that trip. They think themselves invincible. They've just won a great victory. The captain of the ship says no, that they need to remain stealthy. They need to remain quiet. He's cautious. He doesn't want this mission, I think, to lead to outright war. This is more of a covert operation, not the launching of a new intergalactic conflict with Starfleet. Also apparent when a crew member comes onto the ship to answer for why he sent out that coded communication, the communication that Spock was able to lock onto to get that visual on the Enterprise. Again, the crew member sent it out because he was boasting, he was bragging, he was overconfident in their victory, and the captain was saying, no, we need to be silent, we need to get back home without being detected, which is why he demotes him 2 ranks.
On the bridge of the Enterprise, Styles lets Kirk know that they are 1 hour from the neutral zone, and Scotty then pops in and says they have debris. They have debris from Outpost 4.
That they somehow have magically been able to transport onto the Enterprise, keeping in mind when they were experiencing the destruction of Outpost 4, they still were a couple minutes away from it. I don't know how they ended up getting the debris on board, but somehow they do.
It floated really fast to them. But it is in the briefing room, and Styles, Sulu, Kirk meet with McCoy to go over it in the briefing room. In the debris, Spock finds shards of a strong material that he can also break.
Specifically, this is parts of the deflector shield from Outpost 4. Spock explains that it's made out of some of the toughest material known to mankind, and yes, he crumbles it in his fist to demonstrate that whatever weapon the Romulans used was able to reduce it to this fragile state.
The men also discuss the ability to win an attack in a war. They are powerful, meaning the Romulans, but the Enterprise can run faster. Styles is passionate about why Spock doesn't share what he knows about them. Romulans, like others, have weaknesses. He suggests an attack, especially since the Romulans entered neutral space. They did it first.
Styles also doesn't want to appear weak. He argues that running from the Romulans would give them the appearance that the Enterprise is easy prey and an easy target. Spock agrees, but for a different point of view. Spock ties in that there's a theory that the Romulans are an offshoot or an evolutionary side branch of Vulcans. And drawing on that history of Vulcans, explaining that Vulcans were warlike as well, but they branched off in a different direction by suppressing their emotions and giving up their warlike ways. But if they're anything alike, ancient Vulcans and modern day Romulans, running away would give the appearance of weakness. But again, they have to balance that they don't want to start an outright war. At that moment, they get a report from the bridge that the Romulan ship is reported to be on a trajectory and veering toward a comet. It's theorized poorly, but it's theorized in this moment that as the Romulan ship enters the tail of the comet, it will become visible to the Enterprise, and the Enterprise will be able to target it with its weapons and destroy it. So right before we go to commercial break, Kirk orders for red alert.
The Enterprise is still following the Romulan ship, but the Romulan ship decides that they are going to backtrack and go around so that they can attack the Enterprise from behind. But they find that the Enterprise is no longer following them after all. And so then they do evasive maneuvers to be able to ensure they're out of the way of the Enterprise.
Right, because both of their captain's plans have sort of canceled each other out. The Romulan ship was expecting the Enterprise to just be leisurely following them, but instead the Enterprise had jumped forward to attack a ship that was supposed to just be leisurely heading back toward the neutral zone. Both of their plans caused their ships to be out of place or to avoid an imminent direct attack.
I find it interesting also that they both captains of the ship kind of give props to the other commander. Like, wow, he's really smart. Look what he did.
Yes. I think that is a direct pull from, or a direct homage to submarine war movies. I think that's a very common theme in the submarine war movie genre, where each captain develops a mutual respect for their enemy.
Oh, that's kind of poetic.
So since both ships are out of place from each other's maneuver, canceling each other out, the Enterprise acts first and starts shooting wildly from its phaser banks into where they think the Romulan ship might be. Again, best metaphor, these are depth charges being dropped from a ship on the surface of the ocean down to try to attack a submarine.
The phasers hit the Romulan ship, which begins to rumble, and the equipment is failing, so they divert their power to their weapons. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, the bridge of the Enterprise, they also have power overload, and Spock has to jump underneath his station to rewire whatever is sparking underneath his station. While everyone is picking up and putting everything back together from that hard turn earlier and correcting whatever overload is happening, they do see the Romulans fire a large ball of fire, for lack of a better term.
It would be plasma.
Thank you, that's the word. The Enterprise is able to back away from the plasma fast enough to learn that there is limited length and amount of plasma, and it dissipates the longer it's out in the open.
An apt metaphor for a torpedo, where torpedoes only have a specific range that they're effective before they become extremely unreliable, not accurate, and ineffective.
On the Romulan ship, the elder of the crew suffered an injury, and the commander does tend to him and orders to cloak the ship again, even though it's low fuel. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Kirk notifies Command Base that they are entering the neutral zone. They don't have a choice, but they are firing phasers steadily at the Romulans. On the Romulan ship, the Centurion has in fact passed away. The commander then decides that he will do another, more like a decoy, and put all of their debris along with their friend Centurion out into space. On the Enterprise, Spock announces the motion sensor signal has stopped. Kirk has ceased fire. Sulu announces the debris in space, including the body. Yet Spock notices that this wouldn't be enough if an actual ship was wrecked. But now the Romulan ship is completely gone.
So the decoy only half worked, where it was able to escape, but the Enterprise knows that it still exists and is out there. And then we get our last commercial break before the final act.
We have a captain's log. Kirk says if they're at the neutral zone, they lost contact, but the Romulan ship must be nearby on silent mode, as he called it, and they also will go quiet while waiting. The Enterprise, that is. 9 hours and 40 minutes later of silence.
9 hours and 47 minutes.
While we're in Kirk's quarters, Janice goes in to ask Kirk if he needs anything.
Again, proof that there's no doorbells or knocking on a starship.
Oh yeah, she just walks right in. And then I chuckled to myself because I was wondering if she was going to ask if he wanted coffee and she was going to heat it up with her phaser.
Right.
And no, just Kirk has her take everything to the bridge, and then McCoy enters as Janice leaves. He wonders why he would be there and not somewhere else at that moment. You know, having fun, being outside, on Earth, anything, you know, because right now they're stuck in space doing nothing. And then it's funny, he actually says in all of the world, all of the 3 million Earth-like planets and 3 million stars and 3 million galaxies, there's only one of you. So be sure to take care of you. Those kind of nice words of encouragement. Now we're on the bridge. Still quiet. Still dark. Something starts beeping super loud, and they all rush to turn it off. Be quiet.
Yeah, I think it happens when Spock is making repairs to some systems. I think it's Spock that accidentally triggers the beeping of whatever this system is. But in any case, the loud beeping does get shut off, but not before it alerts the Romulans.
The Romulans are super excited that they found them, and they've decided to send out into space an old style warhead that is usually used on their ships for like self-destruction.
And is the same weapons that were used over 100 years ago during the first conflict between humans and Romulans. It's a nuclear warhead.
Even more scary. And the Enterprise fires at the warhead, and that rattles the ship around. The Romulans think that everything is a balanced win, and they push to end the fight. On the Enterprise, when Kirk tries to check in to see how bad that warhead affected his own crew, he learns that 22 were harmed and are in sick bay, but they are okay. Most do have radiation burn. Phasers are still in working order, according to Scotty. And as everybody settles down and is, licking their wounds, Kirk says they're just going to play dead and wait it out. Meanwhile, we learn that in the weapons area, Tomlinson was down there alone. Styles does go to help, and then Uhura takes Styles' seat as navigator. And then down in weapons, they also find a coolant leak, which resulted in Tomlinson's death after Spock was able to save Styles, but he was unable to go back in and save the young man who was supposed to get married that morning. On the Romulus ship, they are very excited. They are going home. Although they do argue, should we just blow them all up or just leave it alone? But the commander is smart and says we'll leave it to another day. The Romulus ship is not as able as they thought it would be, and Kirk connects with the commander of that ship and offers to beam him and any of his crew members that may be alive.
It's important to point out that the reason why the Romulan ship is in such bad shape and is so badly damaged is because they in fact did not try to go home. They in fact came back to finish off the crew of the Enterprise, and in and amongst all of the confusion, Spock, when he ran into the room to save people, also was able to fire the phasers, catching the Romulan ship off guard because Kirk was playing dead this whole time and damaging the ship.
Captain Kirk offers to beam the commander of the Romulan ship over to the Enterprise to get well, mend any of his wounds, and the commander refuses. It is not their way. But then he does say that perhaps in another life they could be friends. And then he blows up his ship. But I think in another life they would be friends.
It's certainly a moment of reflection for both of them where they both have mutual respect for each other as captains and leaders.
And you can see that throughout the entire episode, I think. Especially the Romulan captain, he's always saying what a good thought that was, or he did a good maneuver. I don't know. I liked his honesty. In the sick bay, McCoy is checking on Styles, who is alive and well, and he's actually very thankful to Spock for saving his life. Spock does not accept the thank you. It's not his way also. He was just returning a trained navigator to duty. Sadly, though, Tomlinson did die. Angela, the bride-to-be, can be found in the chapel. Kirk visits her in the chapel and says that their death never really makes sense. We both know that there was a reason. And then Angela, she kind of believes what he says and then agrees. And then she leaves and goes back to, I'm assuming, her quarters or back to duty. She's a tough one.
Yep. And then Kirk just strides out of the chapel and roll credits. So, Jaci, what did you think about Season 1, Episode 14, Balance of Terror?
I loved it. I just explained it horribly. It was fantastic. I loved that we finally got to see what the Enterprise does beyond going from planet to planet, galaxy to galaxy, and meeting people and flirting and eating food. We got to see them use their brains. A different side of the 13 previous episodes we've seen.
Yeah, I equally liked this episode. It's an interesting take on starship battles and starship warfare. Some of the science or some of the facts behind it that were introduced to kind of fit it into the mold of submarine combat don't necessarily make sense. But overall, I can look past some of those minor defects in the plot to appreciate the show trying something new. So I really enjoyed it. We, of course, do have some Tribble tidbits or fun facts about the episode. First airing December 15, 1966, which is also the day that Walt Disney died. Just starting off the fun facts with not so fun stuff. Jaci mentioned at the very top of the episode, and then never mentioned it again throughout the rest of the episode, the helmets that some of the Romulans wore on the ship. Those, in fact, were used as a time and money-saving endeavor so that the extras and all of the actors on the Romulan ship didn't have to go through makeup to have the pointed ears put on each and every day. So, time saving certainly can lend itself to this idea in the episode that the Romulan Empire is structured after ancient Rome. Don't necessarily think we're going to see those helmets again, though. The actor who played the Romulan commander was Mark Leonard. He would later go on to play Spock's father, Sarek. He also would be a Klingon in the motion picture for Star Trek, the first motion picture. It makes him the first actor to play 3 different alien races in Star Trek.
That's fantastic.
He also was on the short list after the first season when everyone was entering into contract negotiations. Leonard Nimoy, who plays Spock, was holding out for a better contract. And so he was on the short list of potential people to replace Leonard Nimoy as Spock in season 2. Thankfully, the contract negotiations worked themselves out. I think I read Spock received like $1,200 per episode in season 1, and his new contract for season 2, he got double that roughly.
Nice.
We've made mention of it several times throughout the episode, but the plot of this episode was directly inspired by World War II submarine movies and submarine warfare, specifically cited by the writer, the director, the developers. Direct inspiration would have been the movie The Enemy Below from 1957 and Run Silent, Run Deep from 1958. Both are actually movies I've seen. Both are worth a watch. Sadly, Jaci, we have to say goodbye to Yeoman Janice Rand. This is the last appearance in the original series. We will see Janice come back in the motion picture whenever we get around to doing.
Why would they leave? Why'd they make her leave?
So, the actress who played Janice had a contract for only 8 episodes.
Oh my gosh.
There were some behind the scenes that we won't get into. I highly encourage you to read her autobiography about her time in Star Trek. She goes into fantastic detail. I won't take it away from her. It's her story, it's her words, but sadly, this will be the last appearance of Janice Rand in the original series.
Oh, I'll have to have some ice cream for her.
And my last Tribble tidbit is just to point out that this is an example how Star Trek would skirt network censorship. TV networks at the time had censorship rules in place that required television shows avoid hot topics of the times for the 1960s. So this would have included subjects such as war conflicts the United States was involved in, but also the civil rights movement and equality and some of those current events at the time. But Star Trek was able to circumvent this in this episode by clearly having a subplot involving the blatant racist attitude of Mr. Styles towards Spock and his prejudiced feelings toward Vulcans because of their similar appearance to the Romulans. It's not going to be the last time that Star Trek does this, but just thought we'd point it out. And those are your Tribble Tidbits. This is where we share our episode ranking, where we pretend the episode is a member of our fictitious starship crew, and we assign the episode a Starfleet rank. A higher rank not only means that we were more entertained by the episode when we watched it, but we feel it to be a more important crew member on our ship. And the opposite is true. A lower rank means that we were not that entertained by the episode, and it's more of a disposable member of the crew, meaning it could get killed off at a later episode and we would not miss it. Our ranking system begins all the way at the bottom with an ensign. It climbs to a lieutenant junior grade, lieutenant, and then we get limited availability and limited available rank spots for lieutenant commander, commander, captain, and admiral. If none of that makes sense listening to this because it's an audio podcast and we're using a visual gag, you can see our rankings listed on our Patreon at patreon.com/treksandtangents, where anyone can view. Jaci, for your season ship, the USS Galactic Glitterbee, what ranking do you assign this episode?
I am rounding out my 5 commanders.
On a scale of 1 to 10, that'd be like an 8 or a 9 out of 10.
Yes.
This will join last week's episode of The Conscience of the King, both parts of the menagerie, and the Dagger of the Mind, which is going to be 5 out of 5 commanders for the starship.
Someone's going down.
As a reminder, we can, as needed, promote or demote episodes to make room, or just because we decide we want to change the rank. So, which for my starship, the USS Cosmic Shark, I'm going to do just that. Currently in my captain position, the only captain position that I have available, I have it filled by the Corbomite maneuver. I enjoyed the Balance of Terror a lot more. I think it's a better structure. The Corbomite maneuver was still a fantastic episode, but it's time to make a change. So I am going to demote the Corbomite maneuver out of captain down to commander, because I still have room in my commander spots.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to put the Balance of Terror up with captain.
Nice.
As a reminder, again, we will publish our updated rankings on our Patreon on Wednesday, the day after this episode airs, at patreon.com/treksandtangents. For comparison, as of the recording of this episode on IMDb, this is one of the top rated episodes for the season. It holds an 8.8 out of 10. We'll be back next week to trek through another episode. But before we go, this is where we'll give our turbolift tease or elevator pitch to next week's episode's plot. I'll give Jaci the title of the next episode, and Jaci, with no other information, will give a brief pitch to that plot. Jaci, next week's episode is entitled Shore Leave.
Like shore leave when sailors get to go off ship at a port?
Sure, but that's the only hint that you're getting.
I'm going to go with that. They're going to go to another planet, galaxy, and they're going to have a break and enjoy some time with some of the cultural fun on that planet.
Tune in next week to see if Jaci's prediction is correct. If you want more show information, you can find and directly support our podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/treksandtangents. Again, as a reminder, if you're listening to this episode live, this coming Friday will be our second episode for our animated detours, where we do a dive into the animated series of Star Trek, available at our Patreon for all of our crew members. You can also follow us on x.com at treks_tangents. We're also on Instagram and Blue Sky at Treks and Tangents. Jaci, where can people find you and what are you up to?
You can find me on Instagram at Jaboom, where I share a whole lot of life. I play tuba and flute in many bands, offer music lessons to anyone who wants to learn how to play anything. I also show off fashion and makeup tips for those in different size bodies. We dress for your body, not the number on the scale. And also, I'm working on my Whatnot shop, and that's Glitterbow Boutique, where all of the clothes and treasures I can no longer have, they can be yours next.
And you can watch me stream a variety of video games over at twitch.tv/PiratePoundTown. On YouTube, I post video games and other random content on my main channel at Pirate Pound Town, and coin collecting and hobby content at Pirate Treasure Hunting. I post socially on Blue Sky at Pirate Pound Town, and I can be found on Instagram occasionally under Pineapple Cannibal. Links to all social media mentioned can be found in the episode description. Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We hope you had fun like we did, and we will see you all next week.
And I hope Angela got a good martini.
End transmission.